Is your browser's extension selling you out?
So Manny, can you tell us about the Botnet backdoor with browser extensions?
Yeah, so the story that I picked up on this week is it's a Krebs story, and the interesting thing here is that when I started to read this, I realized really quickly that I don't know, first of all, a lot about extension development, and so it was kind of eye-opening for me to read what the whole the backstory is to actually this whole extension development, what it's about, how it's sort of managed, and that whole entire environment, something that's completely new to me. And I suspect that a lot of people probably don't understand this environment like I did when I started to read this. So, from that perspective, I think this article was pretty eye-opening. So this article goes into talking about a company called Informatica.io. It's a Singapore-based company who seems to make their money, at least some of their money, from selling the access to specific browser extensions. So what this does, and by the way, a browser extension, for those who don't know what browser extensions are, it's basically an add-on to a browser. And all of the popular browsers today, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla, all have this capability of these extensions, these add-ons, and they basically add functionality and customization capabilities, right, to the browser. So they come in many different flavors. The different types of things that the browser. Some of them are more like tools. Some of them are things like add-ons or extensions that help you with shopping. So I mean, there's a ton of different tools or extensions and add-ons out there today. So these extensions, like anything else, it's a piece of software. It's software that's available out on the internet. All these major browsers make it pretty easy for users to download these. And some of these browser extensions could have millions and millions of users behind them. So there's users that are actually using these extensions that are loaded into their browsers, right? And so understand that when it's loaded into your browser, it's sitting there running on your OS, running at some level of privilege on your box, right? It's running at the level of privilege that your browser is running at. From a developer's perspective, and here's kind of where the story gets interesting. From a developer's perspective, and these are the pieces I didn't realize, browser extension development, it appears to be not very lucrative. So there are hundreds of thousands of browser extensions out there that have developers who have developed it, thought that there was a need for it, created it, maybe had gotten some users to it, and then after some time realized that it's a lot of work. And it appears that a lot of these browser extensions do require quite a bit of work, development work, once you've developed them. So let's say you're a browser extension developer, you develop an extension, and you've got 100,000 users now who are using it. Well, you are now basically become that support. And most of these extension developers are like single people that are working by themselves, right? There's another part of some big company. They're single developers that are trying to support this app, and there's very little money to be made from these apps. And as a matter of fact, later on, I'll talk about Google actually, moving towards a route where they stopped all of the sort of paid browser extensions. So it's now becoming even less lucrative for a developer to develop an actual extension. So what does this company Informatica actually do? So Informatica actually comes in and, I guess you have to kind of give it to them for, thinking down this road. But they go in and they go figure out who the developers are, what these extensions are, and how many users are currently using these particular extensions. And they go out and they offer to the developer monetary, compensation for either renting or buying completely outright their extension. So they'll come in and they'll offer something to buy out your extension, and they give you a one-time fee for buying it. And once they own it, they, in essence, own the users who are using it, right? And now they can change that. They can insert their own code into their extension. And that's kind of what we're talking about, and what this article is really mainly about, is that Informatica comes in and now offers up to either buy or rent. In the case of renting, what they do is they go in and they take a developer and they say, hey, look, we'll give you, for extensions that have over 50,000 users, they'll give you anywhere from $15 to $45 a month for every 1,000 users that are using your extension. That equates to about $750 to $2,250 a month that you gain from just letting Informatica come in and insert their code into your extension. The problem, as I'm sure everyone here can figure out that there's going to be a problem here, is that what Informatica is doing when they insert their code into your browser extension is now they're relying on that user base that you've built up, and now they're using that extension to basically funnel traffic. So they're funneling traffic to who? They're Informatica's other customers. So their other side of their business, so they have the one side where they're buying the extensions, the other side where they're selling basically the traffic from all of these users on these extensions. They're selling them to other companies who wish to basically push their traffic through these users' browsers, right, to their sites, right? So now you've got this sort of two-sided monster here where they're making money, and they make money in the tune of, because they actually said it here in the article, they pay customers somewhere around or customers pay them about $360 a month for 40 gigabytes of traffic, all the way up to about $20,000 a month for 10K gigabytes of traffic pushed, right, to their sites. So it's pretty lucrative, right? When you do the math, I think they're making a lot more from the customers that wish to have that traffic than from the developers that are offering up their extensions for sale. So the article kind of goes into a lot of detail. I won't go into all of the detail that went in through. It's a great article to read, but he does talk about sort of a couple of other things where they talk about, like, Informatica itself. They can see that Informatica has about 3 dozen extensions that they own and they insert their code into, right? And some of these extensions have over 100,000 users, and in one case, they were saying that one of the extensions actually has over 1 million users. So again, very lucrative. They go into the founder and director of Informatica is a guy by the name of Vladimir Fomenko from Byzyak, Russia. I don't know, I can't pronounce it, but it's somewhere in Russia. And he's also the director for iNinja VPN. And the story goes into, Krebs kind of peeks into this and says, well, he also is the director for iNinja VPN, which we all know when you're running a VPN service, more than likely you're probably also offering up your customers some sort of browser extension. So the thought is that the browser extension that they may be offering their iNinja VPN customers probably has the Informatica code within it as well, and they're using that traffic as well to push more traffic to other external sites as well. And then, again, the article does go into talk about a specific developer who had gone in, and he, it was the typical story that you hear, that he had been working on his app for about 10 years, and after 10 years realized, that he had about 400,000 users using his browser extension. He tried to He tried to supplement his income by allowing his browser extension to serve up ads, but that was a total failure. His customers basically started to, complain about it, and so he had to pull away from that. So that didn't work. And then, obviously, Infatica also came to him and, asked him about, doing renting his extension, which he did. And he said it only took a couple days before his customers started to complain that that they saw their browser's traffic going out to things like porn sites, right? So clearly he had to drop that as well. So anyway, not to really get more into the weeds on this one, a really great article, a lot of information about browser extensions, and I learned a ton about this entire environment. So very interesting.
This reminds me of a story maybe a few years ago with a very, very similar concept behind it. So it's a little sad to hear that this is still going on from a few years ago. And it's amazing when you think about money, I guess, as a motivating factor for developers, how it can make them like flip into selling their loyal customers to these third parties because their loyal customers aren't really customers of anything. I guess the word user is correct. They're just users of the system. So I think that opens up another important thing. It's kind of like reminds me a little bit of supply chain compromise, sort of, but this is a little bit different because it's like somebody you trusted to give you free services is now abusing your trust and basically selling you to, like, let's call it the highest bidder. I'm also curious, although I have a few guesses as to what it may be, what is the, like, purpose of some of these, like, traffic driving campaigns that they offer? So what is it that they're trying to accomplish by driving all these users to all these different websites, and what's kind of in it for them? I wonder if it has to do with like search engine optimization and things like that. But this, to me, this is like represents like this seedier, darker part of the internet where it's like all this like weird stuff. Even like when you're just browsing the internet normally, you sometimes accidentally start stumbling on things. You're like, this is clearly clickbait. And it seems like sometimes, with these browser extensions, you don't even have a chance to decide. You're just clicking on, I guess, was something without even realizing it. Another scary thing about browser extensions, I believe, depends on the browser. They're running in the same memory space as your browser, and they have access to a lot of things, like maybe your passwords, maybe the URLs that you're visiting.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Everything on the page. Like if you're browsing to a banking site and you have one of these extensions loaded, they might be able to see how much money you make, things like that, or whatever is in your account. So you really, without realizing it, you're putting a lot of trust in these extensions. And if you're doing something like very sensitive, you might just want to have an extension-free browser just for that purpose, so that you're not inadvertently mixing your two. I can't believe we're talking about this, but you're not mixing your two types of browsing, your secure browsing and your like whatever. I'm just looking around. I have nothing to do, so I'm just hanging out on the internet looking for whatever comes up next. And yeah, I think those are two types of different browsing where you don't necessarily want to have even helpful extensions probably when you're browsing to your banking sites, because they have all your password. Again, they have everything. They might sometimes even be able to see, depending the architecture of the browser, all those things, other extensions that you might trust, and they might be able to get into their memory space. So very, very fascinating topic, and also to me, very scary. My rule of thumb, never use extensions. I don't have any extensions.
And also, like when he's saying the motivating factor being money, for the developers that's creating these extensions, and then the users, they're getting what they pay for. And I know I tell people all the time, my middle name is free and clearance. But when it comes to browser extensions, I don't, load extensions, and I think these users are getting what they don't pay for, right? So they have to be careful with downloading these extensions.
And I think one of the other things, and absolutely, Kim, I think that's the main point here, is that to try to put a little bit of fear into people when they download these things, because look, we've all seen the types of browser extensions that are out there, right? And look, don't get me wrong, there are browser extensions out there that I think are legit. They go along with some of the tools. Like I know there's some password safes that use browser extensions that I think, for the most part, I think you can trust that they're not selling their code off to these guys. But you do have to be careful. And one of the things that I think you really have to be careful is, and this is, Krebs covered this in the article, is that these browser extensions, when they did this sort of survey, they looked at about 150,000 browser extensions. Well, 100,000 of those 150,000 were browser extensions that were abandoned by the developer. 100,000 out of 150,000 were abandoned by the developer. Well, guess what? Those ones that are abandoned, for the most part, there's an opportunity for a company like Informatica to come in and say, hey, I'll buy that, right? I'll give you, whatever it is, $1,000. I'll buy that, even if you've only, at this point, you only have like 20,000 users or whatever. But now, you as the user who still has that browser extension loaded in your browser, there's a new company that owns it. They may not care about you the way that first developer cared about you, right? And so now that browser extension is going to have new code added to it. And, it's one of the points that Krebs makes there is that you got to be really careful, especially when a browser extension asks to be updated. When it asks to be updated, you got to really take a close look and say, hey, is it asking for different permissions when it gets updated? Because why? Why is it asking for new permissions? That this browser's been sitting in my, in my browser for years now, not asking for an update, and all of a sudden it asks for an update, and now it wants new permissions. Got to keep an eye on that stuff.
It's a really tricky topic about updates because everyone is conditioned to update things to the newer, better, more secure version. But I guess when it comes to browser extensions, it might potentially be the opposite of that, and that's really scary. About the password safes, I think this is again where the monetization comes into play. A lot of these extensions are built by companies who have a monetization model where they're getting paid, and the browser extension is just an extension of the service that you otherwise get with that company, and it's not necessarily like their core main product. And I think that's probably what differentiates, let's call it like legitimate extensions that you probably are okay to download as long as you agree with the service, and ones that you're probably have to watch out for. Yeah. Really interesting story. I guess reaffirms my belief, don't download extensions. Thank you, Manny.
Thanks, Manny.
Yep, absolutely.